t'aime, Bruxelles, je t'aime. Tu m'as fait manquer, Bruxelles, je t'aime, Bruxelles, je t'aime. T'es ma préférée, Bruxelles, je t'aime, Bruxelles, je t'aime.
Hello and welcome to Brussels, my love, our weekly talk show from the heart of Europe. I'm your host, Stefan Grobe, sitting in for Maeve McMahon. Thank you for tuning in. Coming up this week, the post-election game of horse trading went into overtime this week. Despite early optimism by many participants, the informal EU Council failed to appoint the candidates for the bloc's top jobs. There is reportedly no resistance to Ursula von der Leyen, Antonio Costa and Kaja Kallas, but the rest of the food fight was as nasty as ever. Who is to blame here? And the outcome of the European elections has plunged France into political uncertainty, even anxiety. President Macron's decision to call snap elections has left the political parties scrambling for future alliances. Is France becoming ungovernable? What is the danger for Europe? Questions to our guests today, and here they are. Maria Rodriguez Alcazar, President of the European Youth Forum. Ricardo Borges de Castro, European and Global Affairs Specialist at the College of Europe. And Tiona Lavrelashvili, Political Scientist and Senior Fellow at Catholic University in Leuven. Welcome again, and thank you for joining us. But before we hear from you, let's hear about the rather surprising outcome of the final round of the European elections.
What was supposed to be a fast-track procedure turned out to be another act of high drama: the lineup of EU top jobs. An informal summit in Brussels struggled in vain until midnight to confirm the appointments, and this despite no serious opposition to the personalities. Yet the European People's Party and Italy's far-right government, both election winners, wanted a bigger share of the power pie. Result: von der Leyen, Costa and Kallas need to be patient until at least the upcoming regular summit meeting next week. Too bad, this combination seems to be the perfect compromise in terms of political affiliation, geography and gender balance. Or not.
Question to you all. Is this lineup of known quantities, of known faces, a perfect compromise? Ricardo.
I think the names these were the names that were on the table. I believe they reflect some of the balances so far of the results of the elections so far. A second mandate in principle for Ursula von der Leyen in the European Commission. She belongs to the most voted party of the European Parliament elections. Then Costa for President of the Council, Mrs. Kallas for the chief for the head of the diplomatic arm of the EU. So I think these names were names that not only they have they meet the equilibria that are necessary in terms of gender, in terms of political families, in terms of regional as well. We could mix into this also the president of the parliament or other.
I was just going to say, in terms of gender, it's a full house for women, right? You add Metsola, you add Christine Lagarde, who is of course whose post is not up for grasp, but women are strongly represented here. So. A perfect fit?
Yes, I think so. I agree indeed that the gender balance is rather visible in this composition of the top jobs. But I think we should also remark the attempts of isolation of Meloni, who also became angry on her potential non-invitation actually to the pre-summit dinner. And I think that this is something also that perhaps we should look into and not overestimate.
I'll talk about Meloni later. But first of all, the center holds, as we like to say. So it's almost business as usual, right? The same majority, a few seats less.
Well, actually, it's quite encouraging that the majority can be the kind of similar of the one that it was before in the Commission. And what we are worried about is really on the roadmap. What will be the key issues that will be put in the agenda? So not that much of who is really in the top jobs, but of course, what we are asking the political parties that are committed to democracy is to block those anti-democratic political forces from holding influential positions, both in the Parliament and in the Commission. And I think we are in the right track for that. So maybe, yes, that's the way forward.
Okay, we still have no agreement officially, right? And the absence of an agreement came as a surprise to most journalists and other council watchers, something that was brushed aside by outgoing council president Charles Michel during his midnight encounter with the media. Take a listen.
There is no agreement tonight at this stage. The political parties are playing a role, and this is natural in such a political moment. They made proposals, and we'll have the occasion in the days to come to work further and to prepare the decisions that we need to make. I think it's our collective duty to make a decision by the end of June. I made several times publicly this point. I have not changed my mind about that. The 27 leaders, they have to work very hard to make sure that there will be an agreement on the institutional cycle and on the strategic agenda. In fact, it was absolutely clear from the beginning, and not a surprise at all, that the purpose today was not to make a decision.
So if the purpose was not to make a decision, why have a council in the first place?
I mean, it was an informal leaders' dinner to discuss, to have the first discussion about the results. So it also doesn't surprise me that they didn't reach an agreement. I would be worried if next week, at the end of this week, so to say, they're not able to reach an agreement about this, because I agree with Maria, it's time to start thinking about the strategic agenda, the policies that will be shaping the EU for the next 5 years. This is where we need to focus our attention.
But it was a kind of a pre-cooked
also
agreement, right? Where you said Scholz and Macron,
it was a pre-cooked agreement,
yeah.
but this did not was finalized, as Ricardo also mentioned. But also, it does not surprise me either, because it was an informal gathering. But the most important is to avoid drama now this week, and to make sure that the deal will be achieved, and to indeed focus on the strategic agenda and make sure that the priorities that need to be addressed, especially in the current poly crisis, that needs to be indeed addressed.
But wasn't that the reason for this pre-cooked deal, to avoid all kinds of drama? Or are Macron and Scholz, are they already damaged goods here?
I want to believe that they were really discussing policy and that they were discussing what are the topics that will be streamlined in the next strategic agenda for the Commission. So whether there will be a reinforced EU Green Deal, whether the agenda for climate, for example, will be stronger, and also whether there will be discussions on the future generations and how youth will be also more represented.
Right, but there has to be a commission first.
Yeah, absolutely.
So now we're going through this. The Christian Democrat, the EPP, did something weird, right? They said, okay, we have this personnel package here, but we want to cut the term of the council president in half. That was out of the blue, right?
Not really, right? Because the treaties also envisage this kind of possibility, and I think that more power, to a certain extent, also requires more responsibility. Of course, now I'm not here now to indeed estimate or judge whether or not this demand was justified, but I think it's important to have discussions that lead to an outcome, that to have leaders. And I think that the Commission President, I believe that von der Leyen will be re-elected, nominated, and I think this will confirm as well that the EU wants to show the geopolitical imperative of the new Commission.
Right. You mentioned Meloni.
Yeah.
Meloni was not happy with this, but rather not happy with the process. So she wants more.
I mean, but that's normal, right? I think, any politician and like her that actually was a winner of these elections, contrary to many of those that are around the council table, she wants, but everyone is doing the same. Everyone is trying. It's a negotiation. Everybody wants to get the best out of this deal. It's interesting that Mrs. Meloni at this meeting, she was saying that she wanted to discuss policies. So because her position, at least in the European Parliament, was not as consolidated as it is today. We know that these numbers might still change, but the ECR, it's at the moment above Renew Europe, above the Liberals.
Is this a foretaste of populist obstructionism, Maria, in the coming years?
What do you mean?
That Meloni is now, standing up against a deal that there were reports that she had agreed to Scholz and Macron in Italy at the G7 summit, and now she's saying no.
Yeah, but I think that also depends on the rest of the political leaders. And for example, we were hearing the Secretary General of the Socialists and Democrats or the Greens, for example, saying that they would not accept an agreement for the Commission if Meloni was supporting. Yeah. So, I think there are also ways in which that can be navigated, and we will need to see what's offered to those political parties and how the final agreement it can be, and whether it's needed or not, the votes from Meloni. So that's the question.
No, indeed, because traditionally there are three biggest political families that negotiate. But now, as Ricardo, you rightly mentioned, due to the results, electoral results in Italy.
These are provisional, so this still could change. So until
Of course.
the 4th of July, the groups need to be formed.
Meloni had a kind of, BFF relationship with von der Leyen just a few weeks ago. This seems to have gone by the wayside, right, Ricardo? Is this...
I don't know if this has gone by the wayside. I wouldn't say that right away. I mean, let's see. I think as the weeks will unfold, we will see where actually everyone then lands. I would say that the way I understand also the positioning of Mrs. von der Leyen, I think she was trying to divide, let's say, the conservative and the hard right and the radical right. She was trying to pull in Mrs. Meloni to divide them, to set them apart, because indeed Mrs. Meloni is not Mrs. Le Pen. So I think that there was that attempt. Whether this has completely, burst, I don't know. I think in any case, Mrs. Meloni will always demand, for example, an important position within the European Commission to Mrs. von der Leyen. Yeah. And we can also now exclude that ECR parties or even the Brothers of Italy, her party, will vote for Mrs. von der Leyen in the European Parliament if Mrs. von der Leyen is the one that is indicated by the Council, because these votes are secret votes. Yeah. So
I want to focus on the candidates now that are on the table here, because in a different universe, in a bygone era, I think things would have been differently. I mean, we said here there was actually no opposition to the top job trio, which was confirmed by several summit participants, but publicly, none of the candidates were without fault. Take a look.
Ursula von der Leyen has not been uncontroversial. There are still lingering investigations into Pfizergate and an alleged wrongdoing of hers over vaccine contracts. She also received blistering criticism for her one-sided approach of the Israel-Hamas war and was criticized for a migration deal with Tunisia that left human rights groups still fuming. Antonio Costa started out as a successful Prime Minister of Portugal until police raided his official residence as part of a corruption investigation. Costa has not been found guilty of anything, but his move from Lisbon to Brussels is seen by some as tasteless and water on the mills of anti-EU populists. Kaja Kallas finally faced heat amid a probe of her husband's business ties to Russia. She survived this political scandal, but her staunch pro-Ukraine position raised doubts about her impartiality and open-mindedness deemed necessary for the EU's top diplomat.
Question, why didn't this criticism weigh heavily in the run-up?
Because these are very important jobs. These are the top jobs which will define the future of Europe in the next legislature, but also in terms of the influence the Council and the Commission, and to a certain extent Parliament. But you mentioned Kallas, so I think that, in my opinion, so she's a good candidate, especially also not because only she's from a smaller member state and from Baltic state, but also because she will have more focus on Russia, but also on fighting disinformation and information manipulation. But she needs to be also very careful not to focus only Russia, but also to take care of other parts of the country.
Right, we heard that. Ricardo, is that part of today's zeitgeist that scandals like these don't seem to matter anymore?
I mean, I think they still matter, right? But I believe that in this particular case, and as you pointed out, I mean, none of these candidates without fault. So I think, I mean, the criticism is there, and people, I mean, Mr. Tusk, one of the questions that he made regarding Mr. Costa was, as you know, I want to have more information about what is the situation of this case in Portugal. So I think these have not disappeared, but also maybe you could make the argument that today litigation, that this type of events are much more frequent than probably in the past. But nevertheless, I think they should be seen, as the piece was saying, that this could be fodder for the far right to have this type of candidates. And Mrs. von der Leyen, as we know here in Brussels, she also has a very sort of particular leadership style that is not appreciated in many corners. So,
but I also believe that in any case, like there is not enough debate also like among the citizens on this matter. No, I mean, I don't think that regular citizens just in Spain, for example, they are really thinking thinking on Callas as what's her profile, what are the scandals that she's carrying with her, or like Antonio Costa's, you know? So, I mean, I feel that that's a discussion very much here in the Brussels bubble, but that's not something that is widely known for the population. So that's why I feel that it doesn't affect that much.
You're president of the Youth Forum, so you have your finger on the pulse of what teenagers think. Isn't the fact that they present a package of personalities with, I don't want to overblow it here, but they all have been involved in some sort of scandal. Isn't that something that the teenagers, who get into the political process for the first time in their lives, something that is almost off-putting?
I mean, I feel that that's really not encouraging, indeed, but that's also something that is not that known. So that's my point here, that it's not widely known what are the scandals that Antonio Costa had, for example, in Portugal, all over Europe. So that's something, it's a very narrow discussion, let's say, or a very narrow circle. But of course, it's not encouraging to see politicians that they are carrying scandals with them, because then you wonder also what are the ethics, let's say. But also we need to be fair as well with politicians and why or how those scandals were and how that was solved afterwards. So in that sense, I mean, we also need to be careful on how we judge people. But in any case, of course, the ethics in politics also need to be put forward. And that's a positive message, I think, for society, not only for young people, but in general, to trust better in the institutions and to trust better the politicians that are leading them.
Yeah, I'm not advocating against
No,
innocence,
like,
right?
Yes.
But, I remember a time when, a scandal like this would have meant the end of one's political career.
I think that in this case, what we have also observed is the investigation process that are ongoing. Rather, for instance, in the case of Costa, he has not officially been charged, or he has also not cleared either.
He has been very quiet about the whole process.
No, he has actually used yesterday in an interview is that let the European Council do their work, do their job, and I think it's and the issue, the case in which he's involved has flared up again because of wiretapping and these sort of things, and I think I would say the more this process lasts, the more of these issues will actually come to the surface.
If we called morphing a country into an authoritarian regime a scandal, Viktor Orban would be a constant political survivor. The Hungarian Prime Minister weighed in on the deal over the top jobs and was, not surprising, not happy. And here's what he said. The will of the European people was ignored in Brussels, he said. The result of the European elections is clear. The EPP finally teamed up with the Socialists and the Liberals. They made a deal and divided the top jobs of the EU among themselves. They don't care about reality. They don't care about results of the elections. And they don't care about the will of the European people. We, Orban, will not give in to this. We will unite the forces of the European right and fight against pro-migration and pro-war bureaucrats. All right, these are the typical antics here. But uniting the forces of the European right, this is quite a political undertaking, as we've seen until now. Or is it wishful thinking?
Not really. I mean, let's have a frank look to the results of the European Parliament elections. Even though there is not a surge of right-wing parties we have seen in France, in Germany, there is an increase.
Yes, but uniting the forces on the right.
This is ongoing. This is ongoing, especially if you look at the ECR.
They hate each other, these guys.
But
right?
I think that's an overstatement from his side.
I don't know if they hate. I mean, let's see. My question is, are they pragmatic enough to put aside their differences and actually try to find, to build a bloc in the European Parliament that would actually give them actual power? I'm still skeptical that they will be able to do this because these parties are also nationalistic parties. So they don't like other nationalities. They have their problems between countries. And so I think there's a limitation there. I think another dividing line is certainly support to Ukraine and the pro-Russia camp and the pro-Putin camp. So I think these are all sort of issues that will continue, I believe, dividing them. But you never know. I think I don't cease to be surprised also by European politics. I mean, in 2019, we also thought that things were very clear. And then Mrs. von der Leyen came out of the blue to become the president of the European Commission. So,
and much will also depend on Meloni, right, Ricardo?
Maria.
So what kind of...
Wishful thinking, uniting the right.
Yeah, it is, but I think it was also quite encouraging that the go-to of the EPP, it was actually go to the democratic coalition, no? And in this sense, I think it also shows the commitment of the different political parties to defend democracy, defending human rights, and defending all the advancement in human rights that we have had during these years. So I want to think that also that means blocking some of those parties that are actually putting more restrictions and that are making steps backwards.
That's it for now. We take a little break, and when we come back, political chaos in France. Is Macron facing the shambles of his policies? Don't go away. Welcome back to Brussels, my love. Our guests are still Teona Lavrilashvili, Maria Rodriguez Alcazar, and Ricardo Borges de Castro. The aftermath of the European elections has plunged France into political hell, as some observers put it. Emmanuel Macron's announcement of snap elections sees the political parties jockeying for the best positions for the next legislative term. And that means a game of tell me who you are and I tell you what coalition is best for you. It's a free-for-all. Old dynamics are no longer valid and reliable. So, first of all, that decision by Macron calling snap elections, was it a desperate move of a gambler or a calculated risk by a political genius? Now you have two extremes.
I think, politicians ask, what are my alternatives? That's the question that they normally ask when they are presented in a political situation. And I think, honestly, I don't see that he had many options, but to delay probably a period of instability until he would be forced to take this decision. So I think he tried to regain the initiative, the political initiative. It is a high stakes decision. He is also, Macron, we can't forget, in 2017, he was a political insurgent that rose to the top of French politics. So I think this is his style, and it's okay. It's nice to say let's send back the words to voters and see what they decide. Of course, it has huge risks, has taken everybody by surprise, and now we need to wait again a couple of 11 days.
He doesn't have a real majority right now. It's always a little tricky, but it doesn't seem to get better after snap elections, right, Tiona?
Indeed. Let's also look at the polls, right, for the upcoming elections. His party is not scoring that well, and what we see is really that the country is plugged into uncertainty. On the one hand, you have Front National, and on the other hand, you have left parties, rather fragmented, I have to say, with different point of views. And you have Mélenchon, who dominates the political discussions. And let's don't forget that Mélenchon is not particularly that Europhile in many ways. He doesn't want to respect the budgetary rules of the European Commission. And also in the left side, you have anti-capitalist movement, which is parties anti-democratic itself.
You mentioned polls, Maria. We also learned from polls that young voters, first-time voters, especially boys, sort of tend to tilt towards the far right. What's the reason?
Yeah, we really don't have yet all the results for all the countries in Europe, but this is a trend that is seen and it's undeniable that a significant amount of young people are supporting far-right extreme parties. And in this sense, also men in particular, and I think in France it was very noticeable, but the question that we should ask ourselves is how young people are represented in politics. What are those parties actually offering to young people? And they're offering them representation. They are showing also the needs, the demands, the challenges that young people are facing. And many times we often see that traditional political parties or political parties that are playing in the framework of democracy, they are not offering enough for young people, and we don't see that the institutions are delivering enough for us. So I can understand this kind of protest vote that comes from many young people, or that they feel represented with those politicians that are putting forward their agenda.
We've seen in France the political parties flocking to one of essentially three blocs: the far right, the center around Macron, and the left-leaning Front Populaire alliance. What will be the election outcome? We asked political analyst Benjamin Morel. Here's what he said.
In order of probability, the first scenario is perhaps a technical government with a total absence of a majority, where no party, no group, none of the three major political blocs will obtain a majority. So an agreement will have to be reached at least for a year before the National Assembly can be dissolved again. The second possibility is a government with an absolute far-right Rassemblement National majority. This is quite likely. The third possibility is a kind of union of the centres, which could exclude the far-left France Insoumise and the far-right Rassemblement National. This would mean that France Insoumise and Rassemblement National together would have less than 289 seats. Not very likely at this stage. The most unlikely scenario at the moment is an absolute majority for the left that would lead to another cohabitation.
Majorité absolue qui entraînerait une autre cohabitation.
Yeah, we have an open field day here of speculating. He mentions a technical government, a technical minority government, whatever that is, as the most likely outcome. Would that strengthen or weaken Macron?
I think it will not be a stable government as far as I can understand it, and I think maybe this is what he's trying to do. Is that, I mean, sometimes we hear that governments need to go to opt for a cure of opposition. Maybe what he's asking now is that the opposition needs to go for a cure of government and show what they can deliver. But you know, this having a year of instability in France will not be good, neither for France nor for Europe, I would say. So let's see how of all of these combinations, how they'll play out. You know, a government of cohabitation between two, a president and a government of different political families. It also might not produce the outcomes that we would need at this moment.
Yeah. Well, how would that affect Macron's presidency? He already is a lame duck.
He is, and he will then be obliged to govern with the political rivals, let's say, and this will also affect its relations with the European Union, especially the Franco-German collaboration also will be weakened, I believe, and some of the important policy dossiers, including on enlargement. I think that we will see some challenges.
What about Le Pen and Bardella? I mean, we talk them up all the time. They're ahead in the polls, but with 30-35%, even with the French system, they might need a partner for a coalition. Who should that be?
Well, hopefully no one. But that's the core thing. A party that is anti-democratic or that is spreading anti-democratic values and is playing out of the rule of law. Hopefully it's not in a governmental position. But it's true that right now, I mean, it's a very risky situation because it's 31% of the population that is supporting that. And I feel it's very clear in the results of the European Parliament elections. There is a protest vote, really, a vote for change in the French system right now. And I feel that the political parties, they are not really creating now a narrative of hope, but more like a narrative against what is in place or a narrative against the establishment in a way.
Yeah.
Ricardo, very briefly, Bardella last week said that he will only take the job as prime minister if he gets a majority. Is he already backing off? Is he tasting the reality of politics?
I think he might be tasting the reality of politics, but he might also be dramatizing the situation and say it's either everything or we don't govern, and it's chaos. And if everybody's in the sense is playing with the chaos possibility to frighten voters, the same way that the government is saying either the left or the right wins, it's going to be economic chaos in France. So.
That's all we have time for. Thank you to our panel here in the studio and you for being with us. Thank you for watching. See you soon here on Euronews. Welcome back to Brussels, my love. I'm Stefan Grobe, still together with Teona Lavrelashvili, Maria Rodriguez Alcazar, and Ricardo Borges de Castro. The UEFA Euro 2024 has finally begun. Football fans across the continent are following the games in one of the beautiful German stadiums or on live TV. So far, the atmosphere is great and no violent incidents between fans have been reported. It looks like, in these divisive times for our fractured societies, football is a unifying factor, maybe the only one left.
I think somehow it is indeed. I mean, and we also need those spaces for dialogue, even and where people can understand each other and even connect in a more informal way. But I think it's also a place where to pass on some values. And I'm very happy actually to see like some football players that, for example,
remember what you want to say.
Yeah.
We come to that because we have an extra here. But football, people seem to get out of everything else and are glued to the TV and follow football, and everybody is together, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's a unifying factor, especially if you're winning as well. I think that helps a lot. But it is true that I think Europeans, and you see in offices here in Brussels, people have their own tournaments internally to predict who's going to win the game. So I mean, it's a moment of also of getting together in squares across Europe to watch the game as it happened here in Brussels. So I think it's also a moment that people from different countries come together to watch something that they enjoy.
Teona, you're from Georgia, and they surprised everybody with their first performance. How do people in Georgia follow this?
People stood behind our team. So for Georgia, it was really a milestone because it was for our first time that we played at the Euro, right? But we lost, unfortunately. But I think that the way how we played also demonstrates that sometimes it's not the victory that counts, but the path that you take. But in general, I think that indeed the football is unifying factor because this is a transnational exercise that we need more in European public sphere. And this is an exercise that helps.
Like the Eurovision Song Contest has kind of lost, at least this year, because there were so many controversies around it. And now for Maria, even football can't escape politics, right? In France, where a far-right government is looming, we just discussed it, football stars have spoken out against such a prospect. Kylian Mbappé has said, "I am against extremes. I still want to be proud of wearing this shirt on July the 7th, that is the day of the final. I don't want to represent a country that doesn't reflect my values, that doesn't reflect our values." Will this have an impact?
No, absolutely. And I mean, those are people that have a big share, that they have a big outreach among young people, but not only young people. And I think it's encouraging also to see the messages pro-democracy and also encouraging people to go vote, because that's also something that they have done. And they have clearly said that those are anti-democratic parties and people should support those values and the advancement of human rights. So I think that really has an impact. And for example, for the European Parliament elections, one thing that we did is a partnership also with artists in the network of Sony Music, and that also had an impact.
So there's the counter argument. They say football stars, highly paid, they're far away from today's all-day families' realities. Should they actually step into the arena and talk about politics?
I mean, that doesn't mean that they don't have values or political preferences. So I think it's totally normal. I mean, it would be much more comfortable, I'm sure, for him not to say anything, to stay quiet and just enjoy the benefits that you just described. Right. No, actually, in the moment of high stakes, he's saying what he believes, and I don't think that that's wrong.
Should we treat football stars, when they do this, the same as famous entertainment stars, musicians, actors? In the US, we see this right now during the campaign. Hollywood A-listers come out in support of usually the Democrats. Should we? Is this something we should appreciate?
I think that's on the one hand, yes, as Ricardo said, they are free to express their own values, preferences, and also in ideas. However, on the other hand, perhaps we should not really rely much on when it comes to the political analysis or judgments from the stars.
Good. That is a great conclusion. We're running out of time here, but thank you so much on the panel, you, my guests here, and thank you for watching. If you would like to reach out to us on whatever topic, our email address is brusselsmylove@euronews.com. You can also contact us on social media. That's it. Take care and see you soon.